If you're called on to give CPR in an emergency, will you most likely be trying to save the life of someone you know or love? Our next guest, Dr. Comilla Sasson, Vice President of Emergency Cardiovascular Care, Science and Innovation at the American Heart Association. She will show us how performing CPR correctly could make the difference between life and death. Good morning, am I saying it right, Dr. Sasson?
Yeah, Dr. Sasson, yes.
Sasson, okay. You know what's interesting to me, the Cardiovascular Care, Science and Innovation. That's interesting with the terminology being used today, especially with startups and everything else that's going on. I think that's interesting.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think cardiac arrest has really come a long way, and I think that's where the innovation part of this is really important. For example, I think most people think of CPR and they think about compressions and breaths, which of course we still want you to learn. But because of innovation, we know now that you can also do something called hands-only CPR. And that's really kind of that first part of CPR. It's very simple. All you're doing is calling 911, sending somebody to go get the AED, and then you're pushing hard and fast in the center of the chest to the tune of staying alive, so about 100 to 120 beats per minute, at least 2 inches deep for an adult. And really what you're doing is you're helping to keep somebody alive until help arrives.
Now, why is it so important for all of us to know how to perform CPR?
Well, we know that most cardiac arrest events will happen at home. And so that's why it's so important not only for you, but everybody around you to know what to do if a cardiac arrest event happens. Unfortunately, only about 40% of people will have CPR performed by a bystander. And right now, unfortunately, 9 out of 10 people will not survive a cardiac arrest event outside of the hospital. And so that's why the American Heart Association's here during National CPR Week, June 1st through the 7th, to help teach people how to do CPR. And we hope that you will help us build a nation of lifesavers by really doing 3 simple things: learning CPR, knowing what an AED is, an automated external defibrillator, and being prepared to act in the setting of an emergency.
Now, how can we make CPR and AED use part of this summer safety plan?
It's really simple. All we're asking at the American Heart Association is for you to learn how to do CPR and for you to share that information with all of your family and friends. On our website, we have some great resources. In less than 2 minutes, you can learn how to do hands-only CPR. You can also find classes where you can learn how to do conventional CPR, so CPR with breaths as well. Now, especially important for children and infants because we know that most likely a child or an infant will have a cardiac arrest event happen because they've stopped breathing. So I always urge people to know, especially if you've got a pool, if you're a grandparent, if you're around kids at all, know what to do and know how to do CPR because again, the life that you save is likely going to be somebody that you love.
Once again, what is the correct technique to perform CPR?
So the way that you can perform hands-only CPR is really simple. So all you have to do is use the heel of your hand, put the other hand on top as well. You're putting that on your breastbone, which is the sternum, that hard bone in the center of your chest. And you're pushing down at least 2 inches for an adult. And you're doing that at about 100 to 120 beats per minute. I always remind people, again, you want to keep your arms straight, keep your elbows straight as well, and use your upper body, use that body weight to do it. We know from just recent studies that were just put out that kids at even 4 years of age can learn how to help respond during a CPR, during a cardiac emergency by calling 911. We know that once you get to be about 10 to 12 years old, you can actually perform compression. So cannot urge how important it is for everybody in your household to know how to do CPR.
Speaking of which, where can our viewers go for more information?
So you can go to the American Heart Association's website at cpr.heart.org. And there you can also find great information about CPR and hopefully help us build a nation of lifesavers where we're turning bystanders into lifesavers.
That sounds great. Thank you again for joining us on Morning Blend, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.